I was in the middle of saving a heart attack patient's life, so I didn't drop everything to save my foster sister's dog. The next moment, I got a message from my fiancé, Felix Callier. Felix, because you let it die and did nothing, Tiffany's dog ended up in the animal hospital. Felix, let's push back the wedding. Consider it your punishment. This was the 9th time Felix had postponed our wedding because of one of Tiffany Kamp's tantrums. This time I didn't want to play along anymore. Then the comment feed drifted across my vision. Go find him on the rooftop, girl. He's actually in love with you. He already saw through the imposter's whole act. He's postponing the wedding to surprise you. He's secretly planning the wedding of the century for you. My heart ached with guilt, and I ran straight for the rooftop to find him. The moment I reached the door, I heard Tiffany's teasing laugh. Do you really think Roxy will come crawling back to beg forgiveness once she sees those words? Felix's tone turned playful. Of course. That's the AR technology my company just developed. Besides, she loves me so much that even a fake message won't make her suspicious. This was her fault to begin with. She deserves a lesson. I froze where I stood. So even the comments that claimed to love me were just another game he was playing to humiliate me. I swallowed down the bitterness rising in my throat and turned to leave. Felix had no idea. The moment his fake comment feed vanished from my sight, the real one appeared. The moment Felix Callier's fake comment feed vanished, the real comment feed began drifting across my vision. Every single one of them was tearing me apart. Why is the real heiress eavesdropping? Disgusting. Everyone knows Felix and Tiffany are the real childhood sweethearts. If she hadn't shown up out of nowhere 3 years ago and used some old betrothal agreement to force herself on Felix, he and Tiffany would already be married. Exactly. A hick from the middle of nowhere, who can't hold a candle to Tiffany, and she still dreams of stealing him away? Keep dreaming. Why won't the real heiress just drop dead already? One look at that sour face and I lose my appetite. Each word cut straight into my chest. So this was how everyone saw me. The villain who deserved nothing but contempt. 3 years ago, I was found and brought back into the Kamp family. I thought I'd finally found a family of my own. But my parents thought I was crude and ill-mannered, so they poured every ounce of favoritism into Tiffany, the daughter who'd been raised in my place. Felix was the only person who ever showed me any real affection. Years earlier, Grandpa Garrett had insisted on honoring the old childhood betrothal. My mother didn't dare accept the marriage because she was terrified of doing wrong by Tiffany. Not wanting to embarrass everyone, I went to Felix myself to call off the engagement. But that day, Felix gently wiped away the tears at the corner of my eyes. He looked into my eyes, his voice gentler than I'd ever heard it. There's no need to call it off, Roxy. I'm willing to marry you. That moment, I thought I'd caught hold of the only light in my life. I thought he'd finally seen how sincere my feelings were. To be worthy of him, I studied etiquette until it hurt, fought my way into a top medical school, and worked myself to the bone in the operating room. Also, I could stand beside him as an equal. But it turned out he'd never loved me at all. Whatever kindness he'd shown me was probably just a game to provoke Tiffany. Just like today. To vent Tiffany's frustration, he'd used his company's newly developed AR visual technology. Also, he could watch me run to him like a fool, drowning in guilt, begging for his forgiveness. I looked down at the engagement ring on my finger, a size that had never once fit right. Felix had bought it on a whim. It was too big, so for 3 years I'd carefully wrapped it in red thread just to keep it from sliding off. Looking at it now, the whole thing felt like a joke. I took the ring off without a flicker of hesitation and dropped it straight into the trash can. Then I turned and walked away, and I didn't look back. Back at the hospital, I'd barely stepped into the department when one of the nurses, Haley Mills, came rushing toward me. Dr. Kamp, another patient just came into the ER. It's critical. The director's asking if you can do one more surgery. I took a deep breath and swallowed down the sharp pain twisting in my chest. Okay, I'll be right there. I turned to head to the locker room to change into my sterile surgical gown. But the moment I pushed open the door, the exhaustion of back-to-back surgeries and the emotional blow I'd just taken on the rooftop caught up with me all at once. Everything went black, and the world spun out from under me. Dr. Kamp, what's wrong? Somewhere in Haley's screaming, I collapsed straight to the floor and lost consciousness completely. The sharp smell of antiseptic flooded my nose. I lay on the hospital bed, my mind still drifting somewhere between sleep and waking. Nearby, I heard the timid voice of the nurse on duty. She seemed to be answering my phone. On the other end, Felix's voice was thick with irritation. Roxy, what game are you playing now, going dark on me again? Didn't you see the texts I sent you? Tiffany's dog pulled through, but it's so shaken it won't even eat. Get over here right now and apologize to her. The nurse flinched, startled, and stammered out an explanation. Mr. Callier, Dr. Kamp can't come to the phone right now. She pushed through several major surgeries back to back and collapsed from exhaustion. She's still on in 4. There was a stunned pause on the other end of the line. A flicker of hesitation crept into Felix's voice. Collapsed. Before he could finish, Tiffany's voice cut in, soft and fragile. Felix, is Roxy just pretending to faint because she's afraid you'll blame her for not saving my puppy? It's fine, Felix. As long as Roxy's okay. I'll calm the puppy down myself slowly. Don't be angry with her. Felix's tone turned cold in an instant. Roxy, you really are something else. Now you're even faking a fainting spell to fish for sympathy? I'm telling you, even if you're dying on that hospital bed, you're getting over here today to apologize to Tiffany. The call ended. The nurse lowered the phone and turned around, finding my eyes already open. Her mouth opened, caught somewhere between embarrassment and pity. Dr. Kamp, just now, Mr. Callier. It's fine. I heard all of it. I cut her off calmly, my voice dry and hoarse. This was the 9th time Tiffany had thrown one of her tantrums. The dog had an upset stomach. The dog was depressed. The dog's coat had lost its shine. Whenever anything, even the smallest thing, seemed off with her dog, she sent for me, a cardiac surgeon, to go treat it. Tiffany shed a few tears, and Felix punished me by pushing back our wedding, forcing me to bow my head. That was when the comment feed drifted past my eyes again. Serves her right. Tiffany fed the dog chocolate on purpose just to test Felix's loyalty. And look, he trusts her unconditionally. Childhood sweethearts really do hit different. The real heiress really doesn't know her place. She can't even compete with a dog, and she still dreams of fighting Tiffany for his affection. Am I the only one who feels bad for the real heiress? The imposter is just cruel. She knew chocolate was poison to dogs and fed it to the dog anyway. Playing the saint up there? If she hadn't wormed her way in, Tiffany and Felix would already be married. Is it really so wrong to use a few tricks on a homewrecker? My pupil shrank slightly. So every single disaster that had ever befallen Tiffany's dog hadn't been an accident at all. She'd engineered every one of them herself. And Felix had used her little schemes as an excuse to trample all over me, again and again. Dr. Kamp, are you all right? You've gone so pale. The nurse studied me with worry. I managed a weak smile. I'm fine. I didn't care anymore what the truth actually was. Whether Tiffany was cruel or Felix was simply blind, none of it mattered. I was just so tired. I dragged my exhausted body back to what was supposed to be our marital home. Except the place was really just a shrine to Tiffany. Shelf after shelf of limited edition handbags and jewelry Felix had bought for her. My own belongings amounted to a single suitcase. I pulled the suitcase out and started packing my clothes. Tiffany was on the couch playing with the dog. When she saw I was leaving, she couldn't hide the smugness in her eyes. She sauntered over and needled me. Roxy, what exactly do you think you have to compete with me? You saw that, didn't you? Felix used cutting-edge tech, that whole comment feed system, just to get even with you on my behalf. You're not even worth as much as a dog in this house. If you know what's good for you, you'll get out of the Callier family and give Felix back to me. I didn't bother sparing her a glance. I grabbed the suitcase and walked straight for the door. Seeing me ignore her, a flash of cruelty crossed Tiffany's eyes. She snatched up the glass music box from the table, the one Felix had once given me on a whim. The next second, she smashed it on the floor, then flung herself down onto the broken glass. A shard sliced straight into her palm. Ow, that hurts. Just then, the front door swung open. Felix walked in at that exact moment. The sight in front of him made his eyes go wide with fury. Tiffany immediately burst into tears, delicate as a flower in the rain. Roxy, I only wanted to talk you out of being angry with Felix. Why did you push me? Felix's face went ashen. He stormed over and slapped me across the face. The blow snapped my head to the side, and blood welled at the corner of my mouth. Felix pulled Tiffany carefully into his arms and looked up at me with cold eyes. Roxy, letting Tiffany's dog nearly die wasn't enough for you. Now you're hurting her too? How can you have such a rotten heart? I pressed a hand to my swollen, stinging cheek and pointed at the security camera. I never pushed her. She did that to herself. If you don't believe me, check the footage. Felix only sneered. Tiffany's never hurt so much as an ant since she was a child. You think she'd hurt herself just to frame you? Roxy, if you're going to lie, at least come up with something better. Right on cue, Tiffany let out a pained cry and pretended to faint. Felix panicked and rushed to call the family doctor. After the examination, the doctor said Tiffany had a mild clotting disorder and needed a blood transfusion. Felix spun toward me, his eyes wild. Take hers. She and Tiffany share the same blood type. I stumbled back a step, stunned. I just fainted from blood loss. If you drain my blood now, it could kill me. That fainting spell was fake too, wasn't it? So what's the harm in taking a little blood? Several bodyguards stepped forward and pinned me down on the couch. The needle slid into my vein, and my blood drained slowly into the bag. I watched Felix hold Tiffany's hand, his eyes brimming with tenderness, and felt like my heart was being carved out with a knife. 3 years earlier, Felix had been in a terrible car accident and nearly bled to death. It was me who, against the doctor's warnings, had insisted on donating 800 cc of blood and pulled him back from the edge of death. But when Felix woke up, Tiffany had claimed all the credit for herself. And now, over nothing more than a scratch on Tiffany's palm, he was willing to drain me dry. As the blood drained out of me, my body grew colder and my vision blurred. Halfway through, I finally couldn't hold on any longer and blacked out completely. When I woke again, I was lying in the guest room. Nobody had bothered to check whether I lived or died. I picked up my phone and saw the photo Felix had posted to Instagram 10 minutes earlier. It showed Tiffany leaning against his chest, sipping a bowl of soup, their fingers laced together. The caption read, "My only bottom line is you." I stared at that glaring photo and found I couldn't even cry anymore. I pulled the 4 needle out of the back of my hand, the wound already closed over, and set the annulment papers I'd signed long ago on the table. Then I dialed the number for the International Frontier Medical Corps. "Professor, it's me. I'll join the peacekeeping medical team headed for the war zone. I can leave today." The next morning, Felix walked out of the master bedroom and found the guest room door standing wide open, the room empty. He frowned and walked to the desk where the annulment statement caught his eye immediately. Tiffany stood nearby, feigning guilt, her eyes rimmed red. "Felix, is Roxy really angry with me? Maybe I should go find her." Felix only scoffed. "Don't bother. She's just playing hard to get. She loves me too much to survive without me. She won't last 3 days before she comes crawling back." Felix was certain I was just throwing a tantrum. But a full week passed and there was no word from me at all. No calls, no texts. Even the hospital said I'd already resigned. Felix's certainty slowly curdled into irritation. Then one day, walking down the hallway, something made him glance at a trash can that hadn't been emptied yet. A ring, caked in grime, sat quietly inside it. It was the engagement ring he'd had his assistant buy on a whim, just to placate his grandfather. Red thread was still wound around the band, since my fingers had always been too thin for it to stay on without the wrapping. Felix's heart lurched. She threw away the ring. Just then his assistant hurried over, carrying a cardboard box. "Mr. Callier, these are Ms. Kamp's belongings, left behind at the hospital. They asked us to bring them back." Before he could finish, the assistant's foot caught on something, and the box tumbled to the floor. A rusted metal tin rolled out, its lid popping open. A yellowed diary and a single sheet of paper spilled out. Felix frowned and walked over, picking up the sheet of paper. The moment he read it, his blood ran cold. It was a critical condition blood donation notice from 3 years earlier. And the name signed as the donor read, Roxy Kamp. The comment feed appeared again. Wait, what? Why does that donation slip say Roxy Kamp? Was the real heiress the one who actually saved Felix back then? Did Tiffany steal the credit? Felix's hands began to shake. His eyes fell on the diary, and it took him a long moment before he dared to open it. Inside was my neat, delicate handwriting. "Gave blood for Felix today. The doctor said I might die." But even unconscious, he kept holding my hand and calling me Tiffany. "It's fine. As long as he lives." Felix's mind went blank. A memory flashed through his head. A few days ago, forcing me to donate blood for Tiffany, my face drained white and my eyes hollow with despair. How could it have been her? Felix's voice shook until it barely came out at all, his eyes flooding red. He pulled out his phone and dialed my number. "Pick up. Roxy, please pick up." After a long stretch of ringing, the call actually connected. Felix's voice trembled. "Roxy, where are you right now? Who actually saved me back then? Say something." But the voice that came through wasn't mine at all. It was the sound of an explosion, sirens, and a foreign man's urgent voice. "Are you Dr. Kamp's family? Her medical convoy was just hit by an armed attack at the border. The entire vehicle was destroyed. We haven't been able to locate her body. Please prepare yourselves." The phone slipped from Felix's paralyzed fingers, striking the polished marble floor with a sharp hollow crack. The foreign officer's voice continued to buzz faintly from the shattered speaker. "Mortar fire destroyed the medical transport. No survivors located. In the primary wreckage, recovery operations suspended due to active shelling." The world in front of Felix disintegrated into a blinding, deafening static. "Felix? What's wrong? Who was on the phone?" Tiffany stood in the doorway of the corridor, holding a porcelain cup of warm milk. Her eyes were wide, practiced in their sweet, fragile innocence. "Did Roxy call? Is she still demanding that you fire the family doctor before she'll come home?" Felix slowly turned his head. His eyes were bloodshot, his pupils dilated into dark pinpricks of pure, unadulterated horror. "She went to the war zone," he whispered, his voice cracking like dry wood. Tiffany blinked, pausing. For a fraction of a second, a flicker of relief and cruel amusement danced across her features before she smoothed it over with a gasp of feigned concern. "The war zone? Why would she do something so reckless? Is she trying to guilt-trip you again, Felix? She knows you have a weak heart. When it comes to..." "Shut up." Tiffany froze. In 3 years, Felix had never used that tone with her. "What did you say?" "I said, shut your mouth." Felix roared, the sound tearing from his chest like an animal in a snare. He lunged toward the fallen cardboard box on the floor, falling to his knees. Among the scattered belongings, his trembling hands snatched the yellowed blood. Donation certificate. Donor, Roxy Kamp. Volume, 800 cubic centimeters. Recipient, Felix Callier. Date, September 14th. 3 years ago. The handwriting at the bottom was signed by the chief trauma surgeon. Patient. Insisted on maximum safe extraction despite acute personal circulatory collapse. Vital signs unstable post-procedure. 3 years ago, when Felix woke up from that catastrophic multi-vehicle collision, his throat had been bandaged, his vision blurred. He remembered a warm, delicate hand holding his callous fingertips trembling against his palm. When he had opened his eyes, Tiffany had been sitting by his bedside with a pale face and a bandage on her arm, smiling softly. Felix, you're finally awake. I gave you my blood. The doctor said you wouldn't have survived the night without it. For 3 years, he had treated Tiffany like a sacred goddess who had traded her own vitality for his life. Every whim, every luxury handbag, every tear she shed became an unpayable debt of honor. And every time Roxy looked at him with quiet, sorrowful eyes, he had sneered at her, mocking her for being an envious, grasping peasant who could never match. Tiffany c'est pure selflessness. The real comment feed flashed across his peripheral vision in blazing, caustic red. Look at him shaking. The clown finally realized he spent 3 years worshipping a thief. Roxy almost went into cardiac arrest donating that blood, and Tiffany just slapped a cotton pad on her own arm and took the credit. He forced Roxy to give blood last week over a minor scratch on Tiffany's hand. He drained the woman who saved his life. Too late, Felix. She's already blown to pieces at the border. Cry harder. The security footage, Felix rasped, stumbling to his feet, ignoring the sharp pain in his knees. The living room cameras. Where are the local backup drives? Tiffany's face went entirely white. Felix, why are you looking for old drives? What does that have to do with? Felix shoved past her with such violent force that the porcelain cup flew from her hands, shattering against the baseboard, splashing warm milk across her bare ankles. He sprinted into the study, tore open the security console beneath his desk, and jammed the hard drive into his laptop. His fingers shook so violently he mistyped the administrative password 3 times. The footage from 4 days ago loaded. 11:42 a.m. On the high-definition screen, Roxy was standing by the entrance with her single suitcase, her back straight, her expression completely numb. Tiffany stood by the coffee table. There was no argument. There was no struggle. The camera clearly captured Tiffany looking directly toward the front door, timing her movements to the sound of Felix's car pulling into the driveway. With a chilling, triumphant smirk, Tiffany picked up the glass music box, smashed it against the wooden edge of the table, and deliberately drove her open palm into the jagged shards. Then she threw herself onto the rug, screaming in agony the exact second Felix turned the doorknob. The audio playback echoed through the silent study. Roxy, I only wanted to talk you out of being angry with Felix. Why did you push me? Felix stared at the screen. His stomach violently convulsed. He leaned over the mahogany wastebasket and dry heaved until his throat burned with acid. She didn't push you, Felix whispered, his voice dead hollow echoing off the wood-paneled walls. You smashed it yourself. You sliced your own hand. Tiffany stood in the doorway of the study, trembling, her eyes wide with mounting panic. Felix, listen to me. She was going to leave. She was going to take your grandfather's ring. I was just trying to stop her. And the dog. Felix turned around slowly. His face was gray, his eyes devoid of any human warmth. The chocolate. Tiffany took a step back, her throat clicking as she swallowed. What chocolate? I love Buster. I would never. The veterinary toxicology report, Felix said, pointing at the drawer he had never bothered to open. The vet called me 2 days ago. They found high concentrations of theobromine and baker's cocoa in the dog's stomach. The vet asked me why someone would feed pure dark chocolate to a 9-pound terrier. He took a step toward her. Tiffany shrank against the doorframe, sobbing hysterically. You poisoned the dog, Felix said, his voice dropping to a terrifying monotone register. You poisoned the dog to make me call off the wedding. You cut your hand to make me drain her blood. And I slapped her. I called her rotten. He looked down at his own right hand, the hand that had struck Roxy across the face. With a sudden guttural roar, Felix smashed his fist into the tempered glass display cabinet beside him. The glass shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces, slicing deep into his knuckles, tendons, and palm. Blood poured down his arm, dripping onto the Persian rug, but he didn't even flinch. He grabbed his coat, kicked the study door open, and ran down the stairs. Felix, Where are you going? Tiffany shrieked, running after him down the driveway in her bare feet. You're bleeding. Felix. Felix slammed the car door, locked it, and fired the engine. As the headlights illuminated the dark road ahead, he dialed his personal pilot. Fuel the jet. Felix choked out through his blood-soaked collar. Set the flight plan for the southern border. Right now. The border outpost of Moria was a desolate wasteland of crushed concrete, rusted, corrugated iron, and the pervasive, sickening stench of diesel and cordite. The wind howled across the desert plains, carrying fine gray sand that stung the eyes. Felix stumbled through the gates of the United Nations Humanitarian Forward Base, his tailored wool coat torn at the hem, his right hand wrapped in dirty, blood-stained gauze. His face was sunken, covered in 3 days of dark stubble, his eyes wild and hollowed out by sleeplessness. Sir, you cannot enter this perimeter. A peacekeeper in a blue helmet shouted, leveling his rifle. This is an active recovery zone. I'm looking for Dr. Roxy Kamp. Felix yelled, shoving a laminated photograph of Roxy in her white surgical coat into the soldier's chest. She's an international volunteer surgeon. Where is her unit? The soldier glanced at the photo, his stern expression softening into a look of grim, exhausted pity. He lowered his rifle and pointed toward a charred clearing, 50 yards away. In the center of the clearing lay the blackened, twisted skeleton of an armored Transportfahne. The vehicle had taken a direct hit from an anti-tank rocket. The metal was warped into grotesque ribbons of scorched iron. Around the wreckage, 3 international medical volunteers were methodically sifting through the ash with metal spades, placing fragments of equipment into labeled plastic crates. Felix's legs gave out. He fell to his knees in the dirt, crawling the last 20 yards on his hands and knees. Roxy, he gasped, digging his bare, bleeding fingers into the burning ash. Roxy, where are you? Sir, please stand back, an older field doctor with a French accent said, trying to pull Felix by the shoulders. The fire burned at over 1,000 degrees Celsius. There are no organic remains left inside the chassis. The entire surgical team. They were incinerated instantly. No, she's not dead. Felix screamed, thrashing against the doctor's grip, pawing frantically through the blackened debris. She's a cardiac surgeon. She knows how to survive. She promised she would marry me. She wrapped red thread around the ring. She wouldn't leave without it. His bleeding fingers struck something hard beneath a pile of melted fiberglass. Felix froze. He pulled the object from the soot. It was a stainless steel surgical retractor, the custom-engraved tool Grandpa Garrett had gifted Roxy when she passed her medical board exams. The letters R. Kamp were faintly visible beneath a layer of baked carbon. Beside it lay the scorched remains of an International Volunteer ID badge. The photograph had been burned away, but the printed name remained intact. Dr. Roxy Kamp, Chief Field Surgeon. The comment feed floated through the smoke, glowing with cold, pitiless clarity. He's digging through ash with his bare hands. Look at how pathetic he is. Where was this devotion when she was working 36-hour shifts and he was buying Tiffany diamond necklaces? He really thought a genius surgeon would wait around forever to be beaten and drained of blood. Rest in peace, Dr. Kamp. You were too good for this filthy world. Felix clutched the charred steel tool against his sternum. A sound tore from his throat that did not belong to a human being. A high-pitched, strangled wail that echoed across the desolate border valley. Pressed his forehead into the black dirt, weeping until his voice gave out, his tears turning the soot beneath his face into a thick, black mud. He had conquered the business world. He possessed hundreds of millions of dollars, cutting-edge technology, and the power to command thousands. Yet he could not buy back 3 seconds of time to tell the woman who had bled for him that he knew the truth. 2 years passed. The city of Oakhaven remained as bustling and indifferent as ever, but inside the Callier Tower, the atmosphere was as cold as a mausoleum. Felix sat in his penthouse office on the 60th floor, staring out at the rain, washing down the floor-to-ceiling glass. He had changed completely. The arrogant, vibrant young billionaire who once laughed with his socialite friends was gone. In his place sat a gaunt, silent man with streaks of premature silver at his temples. On his left pinky finger, he wore a tarnished silver band wrapped in frayed, faded red thread. He never took it off. The double doors of the office opened. Mrs. Kamp, Roxy's biological mother, walked in accompanied by Tiffany. Over the past 2 years, the Kamp family's medical supply company had suffered catastrophic losses after Felix canceled all commercial partnerships with them. Today, Mrs. Kamp looked haggard, her designer dress failing to hide the anxious lines etched around her mouth. Felix, Mrs. Kamp said, forcing a warm motherly smile. It's been 2 years. Since Roxy, since the accident. Life has to go on. Tiffany has been by your side every single day, cooking for you, visiting your grandfather in the hospital. The board is getting restless. Isn't it time you two officially registered your marriage? Tiffany stepped forward, dressed in a demure, pale pink knit dress holding a thermos of herbal tea. Felix, I know you still miss Roxy. I miss my sister. Every day too. But Grandpa Garrett's heart failure is getting worse. His only wish before he passes is to see the Callier and Kamp families united. Let me take care of you. Felix slowly turned his chair around. His gaze drifted over Tiffany's face, entirely devoid of emotion. Did you visit Grandpa Garrett today? Felix asked softly. Tiffany smiled, thinking she had made progress. Yes. I spent 3 hours at his bedside reading him the morning news. The doctors said his left ventricular ejection fraction has dropped to 18%. He needs a miracle. He needs the Roscono arterial reconstruction, Felix said, picking up a pen. A surgery that has only been successfully performed 12 times in the world. And the only surgeon certified to lead the procedure in our hemisphere is arriving at St. Jude's Hospital tomorrow morning. Mrs. Kamp's eyes lit up. The famous specialist from the International Medical Coalition. I heard about him. They call him the Ghost Hand of Geneva. Felix, with your connections, you secured his services? The specialist is not a man, Felix said, his eyes narrowing slightly as he looked at Tiffany. And she did not accept my money. She accepted the case. Because Grandpa Garrett once funded a charity clinic for orphan medical students 30 years ago. He stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. The welcoming banquet is tonight at the Grand Hyatt. The entire medical board and city council will be there. You two should come. After all, the specialist requested that the Kamp family be present. Tiffany beamed with pride. Of course. We'll prepare the finest welcoming gift. As they left the office, Tiffany leaned against her mother's arm in the hallway, whispering with a triumphant grin. See, Mom? I told you. Once the old man is saved, Felix will have no choice but to marry me. The grand ballroom of the Hyatt Regency was illuminated by towering crystal chandeliers. Over 300 prominent physicians, hospital directors, and pharmaceutical executives gathered in black tie attire, murmuring excitedly about the mysterious guest of honor. I heard she spent 2 years in the northern conflict zones, performing over 400 emergency open-heart procedures under active artillery fire. A senior cardiologist whispered. She published the Universal Microvascular Grafting Protocol that revolutionized pediatric transplants. Another added. The Nobel Committee already shortlisted her for next year. Tiffany stood near the champagne fountain, wearing an off-the-shoulder emerald gown, her wrist adorned with the diamond bracelet Felix had bought her years ago. She held her head high, enjoying the envious glances of the junior doctors. Felix, Tiffany purred, tucking her hand into the crook of Felix's arm. When the director introduces her, let's offer her a consulting seat on the Kamp Pharmaceuticals board. It will look wonderful for our family's public image. Felix didn't answer. He stared at the entrance doors, his jaw set like stone. At precisely 8 o'clock, the double doors of the ballroom swung wide open. The director of the State Medical Association, Dr. Raymond Shaw, stepped into the hall, his face beaming with profound reverence. He cleared his throat into the podium microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished colleagues, please join me in welcoming the Chief of Cardiovascular Reconstruction for the International Red Cross, Senior Fellow of the Swiss Academy of Medicine, and the lead surgeon for tomorrow's landmark procedure, Dr. Roxy Kamp. The room went dead silent. A woman walked through the archway. She wore a bespoke midnight blue silk pantsuit that emphasized her tall, slender frame. Her long, raven black hair was swept back into an elegant, razor-sharp ponytail, revealing a face of breathtaking aristocratic beauty. There was no trace of the timid, sleep-deprived resident who used to walk with her head down, apologizing for taking up space. Her skin was luminous, her posture commanding, and her dark almond-shaped eyes held the cold, untouchable clarity of a sovereign looking down upon dust. Beside her walked 2 uniformed United Nations security liaisons and a tall, strikingly handsome man in an olive-drab officer's dress uniform, Major Ethan Vance, the commander of the elite rescue detachment that had extracted her from the rubble 2 years ago. The champagne flute in Tiffany's hand slipped, shattering against the marble floor with a sharp, violent crash. Roxy. Mrs. Kamp gasped, clutching her throat, her knees buckling against the cocktail table. She's alive. Felix stood frozen. The glass of whiskey in his hand fell. The amber liquid splashed across his polished leather Oxfords, but he didn't feel it. His heart hammered against his ribs so violently he thought his chest would burst. Roxy. She wasn't Ash. She wasn't dead. She was standing right there, radiant, untouchable, alive. The real comment feed exploded across the air in a blinding cascade of golden, celebratory fireworks. She's back. The Queen has returned. Look at Tiffany's face. Her soul just Left her body. Felix looks like he's having a full-blown stroke. Stand back. Don't let his dirty eyes touch our Dr. Kamp. Look at the man beside her, Major. Vance is 10 times hotter and 1,000 times more loyal than that trash CEO. All hail Dr. Roxy Kamp. The ultimate flex. Roxy. Felix didn't care about the 300 guests staring at him. He didn't care about the cameras, the board members, or his company's stock price. He broke into a run, knocking over a tray of hors d'oeuvres, shoving past the director of health, lunging toward the stage with his arms outstretched, tears pouring down his pale cheeks. Roxy, you're alive. God, you're alive. Before his fingers could even brush the sleeve of her silk blazer, a heavy, iron-hard forearm blocked his path. Major Vance stepped smoothly between them, his hand resting casually on the combat holster at his hip, his cold gray eyes looking down at Felix with pure, lethal contempt. Stand back, civilian, Vance ordered, his voice vibrating with military authority. Maintain a 5-foot perimeter from the chief surgeon. Get out of my way, Felix yelled, his voice cracking into a ragged sob. That's my fiancé. That's my wife. Roxy stopped walking. She slowly turned her head, her gaze drifting over Felix's face. There was no hatred in her eyes. No burning rage. No lingering sorrow. There was only a vast, infinite, chilling emptiness, the look one gives to a stray pebble on the side of a road. Mr. Callier, Roxy said, her voice smooth, melodious, and completely detached. If you are experiencing an acute neurological episode, I suggest you report to the emergency triage downstairs. You are obstructing the medical delegation. Felix's breath caught in his throat. The clinical, icy politeness in her voice hurt 1,000 times worse than if she had driven a scalpel directly into his heart. Roxy, please, Felix wept, dropping to one knee right there on the red carpet, completely heedless of the flashing cameras. Don't talk to me like that. I know everything. I found the blood donation slip. I found your diary. I saw the security footage of Tiffany cutting her own hand. I was blind. I was a monster. Please hit me, scream at me, kill me if you want, but don't look at me like I'm a stranger. He pulled the tarnished silver ring from his pinky finger, holding it up with shaking, bloody hands. Look, I kept it. I kept the red thread. I looked for you in the desert for 2 weeks until my hands bled. Roxy, please come home. Roxy looked down at the ring. A faint, mocking smile touched the corner of her lips. Mr. Callier, Roxy murmured, leaning down slightly so her voice carried clearly into the microphone pinned to her collar, broadcasting across the entire silent ballroom. 3 years ago, you forced me onto a couch and drained 400 cubic centimeters of my blood because your foster sister scratched her palm. 2 years ago, you left me on a hospital bed while I was collapsing from exhaustion to demand I apologize to a dog. She straightened her spine, her eyes sweeping over the pale, trembling faces of Mrs. Kamp and Tiffany in the front row. The girl who wrapped red thread around a ring that never fit her died in the desert of Moria 2 years ago. I am Dr. Roxy Kamp, Chief of Surgery for the Internationale Coalition. I do not have a home with you. And I certainly do not have a fiancé. She turned on her heel, her silk cape billowing behind her, and walked toward the VIP conference suite without looking back a single time. Behind her, Felix collapsed forward, his forehead slamming against the marble floor, sobbing so violently that his chest heaved in ragged, breathless spasms. The following morning at 6 a.m., the observation gallery of Operating Room 1 at St. Jude's Hospital was packed to maximum capacity. Over 50 senior cardiovascular specialists sat behind the glass partition, watching the surgical theater below. Grandpa Garrett lay on the operating table, his chest prepped with iodine, his vitals displayed on the high-frequency telemetry monitors. The case was practically a death sentence: massive aortic calcification, 3-vessel coronary occlusion, and severe mitral regurgitation. Roxy stood at the head of the table, her sterile green gown tied, her magnifying loops adjusted over her sharp eyes. Initiate cardiopulmonary bypass, Roxy commanded calmly. Heparin dosage 300 units per kilogram. Scalpel. Her hands moved with a supernatural, breathtaking precision. Where other surgeons hesitated for minutes over scarred myocardial tissue, Roxy's fingers danced with razor-thin microforceps, dissecting the calcified vessels with the speed and elegance of a master calligrapher. Up in the gallery, the chief of surgery shook his head in absolute disbelief. Look at that suture technique. She's executing a triple vessel anastomosis in under 8 minutes. That's not skill. That's genius. Down in the scrub room hallway, Tiffany was pacing frantically. She had overheard the hospital directors talking earlier. Once Grandpa Garrett survived, he planned to rewrite his will, transferring the entire family, foundation and 30% of the Callier conglomerate shares directly to Roxy as restitution. I can't let him wake up, Tiffany thought, her fingernails digging into her palms. Until she bled. If the old man dies on the table, it's a surgical malpractice incident. Roxy will be stripped of her license, and Felix will come back to me. She pulled a small vial of concentrated potassium chloride from her pocket, stolen from the emergency crash cart on the 3rd floor, and slipped into the perfusion control room behind the operating theater. She waited until the junior perfusionist stepped out to retrieve a blood gas report. With trembling hands, Tiffany reached toward the secondary intravenous injection, poured on the heart-lung bypass machine. Click. Before the needle could pierce the silicone membrane, a heavy, iron grip locked around Tiffany's wrist. Major Vance stood behind her, his combat knife already cutting the lanyard from her neck, twisting her arm behind her back until the plastic vial dropped onto the tile floor. Attempted first-degree murder of a high-priority patient under federal protection, Vance said coldly, his voice devoid of all warmth. Officers, secure the prisoner. 2 armed military police officers stepped into the room, snapping heavy steel handcuffs around Tiffany's wrists. Let me go. I'm the daughter of the Kamp family. Felix. Mom. Help me. Tiffany shrieked, thrashing against the restraints as she was dragged down the main corridor. Down in the operating theater, the rhythmic, steady beep of the telemetry monitor echoed through the sterile air. Beep, beep, beep. Aortic clamp removed, Roxy announced, stepping back from the table and stripping her bloody gloves. Sinus rhythm restored. Blood pressure, 120. Over 80. Surgery completed successfully. The observation gallery erupted into a thunderous standing ovation. The press conference held in the hospital auditorium that afternoon was broadcast live to over 20 million viewers nationwide. On the massive projection screens behind the podium, Major Vance displayed the complete forensic dossier compiled by the International Criminal Police Organization and the State Department of Justice. Slide 1. The high-definition surveillance footage proving Tiffany deliberately self-harmed to frame Roxy. Slide 2. The veterinary lab results confirming Tiffany systematically fed her dog toxic doses of dark chocolate. Slide 3. The bank records showing Tiffany embezzled $12 million from Kamp Pharmaceuticals into offshore dummy accounts in the Cayman Islands. Slide 4. The certified hospital records from 3 years ago proving Roxy Kamp was the sole donor who provided 800 cubic centimeters of emergency blood to save Felix Callier's life. And finally, the security footage from 40 minutes ago showing Tiffany attempting to inject a lethal dose of potassium chloride into Grandpa Garrett's bypass machine. The reporters in the auditorium erupted into a frenzy of camera flashes and furious shouting. Mrs. Kamp, did you know your adopted daughter stole your biological daughter's medical achievements? Mr. Callier, is it true that you forcibly extracted blood from the woman who saved your life to appease a criminal? Tiffany Kamp is facing 25 years in federal prison for attempted murder. Mrs. Kamp sat in the front row, clutching her chest, sobbing hysterically as corporate security escorted her out. By noon, the Kamp family's stock plummeted by 80%, triggering an immediate regulatory freeze and bankruptcy proceedings. Felix stood at the back of the auditorium, leaning against the wall, staring at the stage. Roxy sat behind the microphones, dressed in her crisp white doctor's coat, answering clinical questions from international medical journals with poise, intellect, and grace. She didn't mention the betrayal. She didn't mention the tears. She had already elevated herself to a realm so far above their petty squalor that their existence could no longer cast even a microscopic shadow over her light. Late that evening, a heavy winter snow began to fall over Oakhaven, blanketing the city in a quiet, pristine white. Roxy walked out of the hospital entrance, wearing a long charcoal wool coat, a warm cashmere scarf wrapped around her neck. Standing on the snow-covered sidewalk outside the gates was Felix. He had no umbrella. He wore only a thin dress shirt and trousers, shivering violently in the sub-zero wind. His hands were blue from the cold, clutching a small, repaired glass music box and a handwritten letter of absolute property transfer, signing over his entire multi-billion-dollar corporate empire to her name. Roxy, Felix whispered, his lips trembling, his teeth chattering as he took a single, hesitant step forward. Roxy stopped 5 paces away. Major Vance waited by the running SUV at the curb, holding the passenger door open, watching quietly. I signed everything over to you, Felix wept, hot tears freezing on his cheeks. As he dropped to his knees in the deep snow. The company, the penthouses, the patents, everything. I'll step down. I'll leave the country. I'll live in a monastery, just please tell me that you don't hate me. Roxy looked down at the man kneeling in the snow. She remembered the 3 years of cold dinners she had reheated alone at midnight. She remembered the red thread she had carefully wound around an oversized ring. with trembling fingers. She remembered lying on a cold couch, watching her blood fill a plastic bag, while he held another woman's hand. And looking at him now, she felt only a profound, liberating peace. Felix, Roxy said softly, her voice carrying gently on the winter breeze. Felix looked up, his bloodshot eyes flaring with a wild, desperate, dying spark of hope. Yes, Roxy? Yes. I don't hate you, Roxy said. Felix's breath caught in his throat, a sob of relief rising in his chest, until her next words fell like ice. Because hatred requires feeling, Roxy continued, her eyes clear, bright, and completely untroubled. And to me, Felix Callier is nothing more than a patient whose file has been permanently closed. She turned around, stepped into the warmth of the vehicle, and closed the door. The SUV accelerated smoothly, its tires leaving crisp tracks in the fresh snow, heading toward the airport where an international transport was waiting to take her to her next medical mission in Geneva. Behind them, in the rearview mirror, Felix remained kneeling in the freezing dark, clutching a broken music box to his chest, screaming her name into the empty, howling storm until his voice shattered into the night. The real comment feed drifted lazily across the starlit sky, glowing in soft, luminous gold before fading into eternity. Final score, Queen Roxy 100. Trash 0. The operating room is clean, the future is bright, and the sky belongs to her. Goodbye, Oakhaven. Long live DR. Come.